All right, welcome back to another episode. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So, without further ado, we are going to introduce you to our special guest. And because nepotism is king here, we've got Xander Boyce, and we interviewed his sister, and she said, "We'll beat you up if you don't let my brother on." So here we are. So, Xander, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm 6'2". I like long walks. Sorry. No, I'm.
And yet,
I'm.
your sister thinks she can beat you up, and she's tiny.
Yeah, she definitely cannot. So I worked with special forces for a little while, mostly doing pickup of digital intelligence. When I was in the Coast Guard, they would follow around the SEALs and pick up all the cell phones that were on the ground for various reasons.
Everything they dropped, they just randomly dropped things. Oops.
They do. It happens all
How
the time.
did that MP3 player get there? I don't know.
Yeah, just magic tech just dropping out of the sky. So then before that, I was or before and after, I guess I've done IT work, and then I don't know. I just do all sorts of random stuff. Scuba dive, skydive.
Long walks on the beach, apparently.
Long walks on the beach. I do love long walks to the beach. I miss the beaches. Miss good beaches anyway.
Yeah, you live up in the weird country of Washington.
Where all the beaches are really, really cold.
They are. I miss Florida. I was stationed in Pensacola for a while, and I miss those beaches.
Living in Savannah, the best part was the pools were open all but 2 months of the year. And water in December off in the ocean was like 98 degrees.
Right? No, always bathwater warm in the Caribbean. Always.
What, JR? It's not our fault we didn't burn up in the sun like a vampire.
I can't help myself. But at least you have glorious weather in Washington, right? Where it's either raining, fixing to rain, or just got done raining.
So I live in like the least rainy part of Washington.
So you live where the sparkly vampires are not.
Yes, so I live in the rain shadow of Mount Rainier. So it's
rain shadow.
So basically, I get like 4 inches of rain a year versus like 6 feet or 6 miles to the south of me. They get like 40 inches of rain.
So it sounds like the perfect setting for some sort of urban fantasy going on.
Oh, I would love to. I have a couple of stories that I have been meaning to write here, actually. But
Dresden Files, eat your heart out.
waiting for time to write.
Okay. That is always important. So now, dear listener or viewer, now that we are on the YouTubes, as Bernie says, the YouTubes, we get to say how we first met them. So I've got my mittens ready, and I actually found Xander through his sister, who I found through Cisca. So that's my interesting story. But I bet, Doc, you've got something to say because you're giggling.
No, it's the same thing. I met him because I met Jay, and she was like, we were talking, and I'm, hey, if you find any other really cool authors that want to come on and do a podcast interview, yeah, my brother would have a lot of fun talking with you guys. Okay.
So I think she's angling to get invited back to family dinner. So you have to cook for her. That's what this is about.
Oh, yeah, I don't know how that's going to work. She's got all those dietary restrictions. No one wants that.
Oh, Elvis doesn't like it either. So she's going to hear this, and you're going to have some explaining to do.
That's what happens. I'm the older brother.
That's how he knows she listened to it.
Exactly. If she doesn't have anything to complain about, am I really being the bigger brother?
No, if she doesn't have anything to complain about, then, she'll just, this way what she'll complain about.
That's true.
I'm the oldest sibling. I get it.
It's why you're so bossy.
You like it. So, Star Wars, Firefly, or Star Trek? What is your religion?
All right. So, if you had asked me this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have definitely like said Star Wars, right? I was one of those kids that camped out for 2 weeks for episode 1.
Aww.
Absolutely just loved the first trilogy, and then Kathleen Kennedy happened.
Ooh, yeah.
We hear that a lot.
So yeah, just I have to say Firefly at this point, because I just really hate what Star Wars has become. And Star Trek is great, but it never hooked me as much as Star Wars did back in the day.
It was a
I
little
can
too
understand.
utopian for me, but they did have the holodeck, and we'd abuse that in all kinds of ways.
You know what?
Star Trek was a
It's nice.
fantastic science fiction. Like they had like, what if one of our crew members becomes a god? What if like we get infestations of random animals on our ship? So that they had better science fiction, but Star Wars was just a better fantasy.
I
Like,
think Star
opera.
Wars was more fun and less worry about
Mhm.
actual plausibilities.
Yeah.
But fantasy. So
No, we got plausibility with the midichlorians.
the
Implausibility.
No. So fantasy. What is your religion in fantasy? Potterverse, Lord of the Rings, or Game of Thrones? Now we will judge you for this.
None of the above.
Okay, so what would you
Can I say
pick?
none of the above? If I was going to go with real fantasy, it would be Dragonlance.
Okay, fair enough. We will accept that.
Because I loved Lord of the Rings. They're fantastic stories, but going back and rereading them is like shooting yourself in the head.
I like the tall elves in Lord of the Rings, but I do like Dragonlance a lot. Certain things. I love the Kenders. They're my favorite.
Oh, the Kenders. Yeah, Kinder are great. I loved the dragons in Dragonlance. There's a book called The Dragons that was like one of the first books of the Dragonlance series that I read. It's one of the like 13,000 offshoots that they did, which I just absolutely loved. The idea of like these people that lived for, millennium, and that you kind of get like individual stories from like their growing up era as they go through, the turn of time.
So, kind of getting you a little bit off topic of dragons, because we could go down that avenue forever, because we all know I like dragons. But what was your first love? Science fiction or fantasy? JR, shut up. You're wrong.
So, probably science fiction. Mostly because that's what my dad gave me when I was a kid. So the first like book that I remember ever reading as a child was Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, and I just loved the idea of a spaceship where they train soldiers, and however terrible that is now that I'm an adult and like think about it, where they're training these like child soldiers. But anyway,
how we see and understand things as a juvenile reader versus an adult reader is always very interesting when you go back and read those same stories.
You're just like, why are
sometimes
you
you're like,
so
more cringy than I realized.
People at a young age, I don't have as much problem with. Actually sending them to war, no, that's a little bit something else.
Like a 12-year-old decides the fate of the world, that's okay.
No, not okay with that. You gotta at least be old enough to go to boot before we can even consider.
So you're not prepared to let Viking decide the fate of the galaxy?
I'm not prepared to let Viking decide the fate of his socks. So, and the answer is no, he doesn't wear them if he's given an option.
Well, why would you? Socks are terrible.
If your toes are cold.
That's why you live in a place warm enough that your toes don't get cold.
Yeah, unfortunately, he does not.
I don't either, so I have to wear socks on occasion. But
just don't wear them with your sandals, and all will be forgiven. So
that's not allowed.
Got it. Wear them with sandals. Got it. Okay.
No,
black socks and sandals.
No socks and sandals.
Done. Isn't that what we wear when we step into the yard and we shake our fist at the sky and yell at the kids to get off our lawn?
Yeah, exactly. No, those are slippers.
There's a reason why
and
you
your
want to
robe.
be on camera. You'd break the cameras. What do you love about science fiction and fantasy as a genre?
This is going to be the same answer that everyone who I feel like does it is the possibilities. So I love the idea of taking an element of our society and kind of blowing it out of proportion and saying, what if? What if monsters spawn in your backyard and everyone gets magic powers tomorrow? What happens then? What do you do? How do you deal with that? What if dragons were real? What if I got sent back to time and was on a warship in the middle of World War II?
Well, if you're JR, you'd fall off the boat.
So it's the what if. I like the what if.
JR.
You're muted, I think, bud.
Well, what JR is trying to ask
No,
you.
it was freezing because I was trying to, while we were talking, download the cover of his book for that part of the episode because I realized I didn't do it. Oops, my bad. So, what's your first memory of engaging in science fiction or fantasy? Was it the Star Wars that you watched as a kid, or was it the Ender's Game, or was there something else? Where did you discover your love of the sci-fi genre?
Now that I think about it, it was actually probably a children's story I read called George and the Dragon. That was probably my first science or fantasy exposure. And it tells the story about St. George defeating the dragon in Europe, or the UK specifically, I guess. And I just the concept of the knight and the valorous man going out and kind of saving the world has always kind of struck with me, and that's been like my, I don't know, I like that idea, that trope.
Okay, it's a good answer. So those were good answers. So that's because you write lit RPG. We're gonna rejigger that question and say, what's your first memory of the blending of the lit RPG RPG genre?
What's your first RPG?
Oh, my first RPG. Gosh.
Come on, establish your street cred.
Final Fantasy IV.
So do you play tabletop RPGs as well?
I do, yeah. I play Pathfinder specifically nowadays.
1E, 2E, what?
1E. I played a little bit of 2E. I played 5E. I played 4. I've played 3.5. I played Fate. I played Masquerade. I played everything, but Pathfinder 1E is my go-to.
It's a good jam.
Are you satisfied with his street cred now, Cisca? That you interrupted for this?
Yes.
Okay, we good. Okay. So what was your first memory of the lit RPG genre?
All right, so it kind of depends on how you define lit RPG. There's no like authoritative answer on what is lit RPG. So it's either Divine Dungeon by Dakota Kraut, or it's Adventures on Terra by R.A. Mejia.
Okay. He's a interesting guy. We interviewed him back on the old podcast.
Oh, Ramon or Dakota?
Ramon.
Ramon. Yeah, he's fantastic. He's the nicest guy you'll ever meet.
That was my experience as well. So, how did your love of the lit RPG genre transition into you writing stories in it?
So I started reading leading lit RPG in 2015, and really the genre had just kind of picked up and was starting to become popular, and I wanted more books, and there weren't any more books.
So you made your own.
So I was like, well, fine, I'll tell the story that I want then. So I started writing. First was a Dungeon Core novel that never really got off the ground, and then I read a book by Tao Wong called System Apocalypse, which was a post-apocalyptic lit RPG, or an RPG apocalypse, if you will. And that I just fell in love with that concept, and that's what Red Mage came from.
Cool.
All right, you said Dungeon Core. What is that?
Dungeon Core is have you ever played Overlord or
I did. It was okay.
Yeah, so
Dungeon Keeper was better. So
Hmm.
much better.
So Dungeon Core is the concept of a book that was told through the eyes of the dungeon.
Clearly, I don't have as good a nerd cred as I thought I did.
So Divine Dungeon is probably the first big dungeon core that was that came out, and but basically, yeah, you're usually a sentient rock essentially who's making a dungeon and kind of balances out like danger versus rewards for the adventurers and building up a town around that that kind of exploitation of a magical resource.
So, like
Okay.
Dungeon Keeper.
Yeah, Dungeon
Okay.
Core.
I love
So-
that game so much.
All right, you're trying to out nerd me. I get it. I will have to
Easy
do
to
better
do.
next time. So
Easy to
many
do.
author. Go ahead. Are you done mocking me?
No, never.
Okay. So many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments that really shaped you as a storyteller?
There's so many. So I just recently published a book called Tall Rock, which is about a man who's recovering from some kind of tragic real life experiences by running away and dealing with it in a very unhealthy way. And
I would know
think
nothing about that.
I think my time in the military and then also a couple of real life experiences that I had with some similar tragedy, not on my part, but in friends of mine, and seeing what they've gone through and seeing, people in the military dealing with things in really inappropriate ways, especially the difficulties of life. I think that has definitely been part of my storytelling experience, and talking about how to appropriately deal with just really terrible situations. I think is it's something that I do in all of my stories, um, because it is such an important thing to me to
So do you,
talk about. Go ahead.
To talk
do
about
those
good coping skills or bad
yeah,
ones?
do those poor
about
coping skills
how to fix them, and how to do it better.
so do those poor coping skills include like overpriced Camaros with horrible interest rates and marrying women that really don't love you and maybe you shouldn't have met in the first place if you were hanging out in decent places?
Yeah. Or playing video games for too long and drinking too much, and those kind of terrible coping skills like you see in the military all the days. But no, unfortunately, not any of the buying a Corvette out of boot type coping skills.
Cisca, was that you?
I played with swords and and when not doing that, locked myself in my room and did puzzles. And,
Then you did well. Okay.
I
It's
was
probably
a
a good thing that
big nerd.
it's probably a good thing that Doc was sober while the rest of us weren't.
Oh, I didn't say anything about that. I just
So your bio and you have mentioned that you served in the U.S. Coast Guard. So we ask all of our authors who were also in the military or also military veterans this question. But how do you feel like your time as a puddle pirate affects the kind of stories you tell?
I think all of my one of the major maybe you people that had like lots of funding didn't have to deal with this, but one of the things that the Coast Guard has that is significantly worse than the other branches is a lack of funding and doing more with less, as the kind of the unofficial motto of the Coast Guard is.
I thought that was the Marine Corps.
No, that's stealing from other people. I mean,
no. That's the Marine Corps just taking the Navy shit.
no, that's their unofficial. Your drift is a gift. Anything that's not bolted down is a gift. There is a drift, and anything that's not bolted down with enough time, or is bolted down and you have enough time, is a gift.
Yeah, we encountered some of that in Iraq.
So I think that a lot of my stories are dealing with resource scarcity and finding creative solutions around that, and that's stems a lot from my time in the Coast Guard and having a boat that was older than I was to try to deal with drug traffickers and human traffickers and try to catch them on 30-year-old equipment.
So do you have your personnel scrounging off their fallen to retrieve, That always irks me when I see these war movies and their buddy dies and you just leave him and like he's got a gun that still works. You're low on bullets and you left his. Why?
Yeah. So absolutely. Why wouldn't you do that? You gotta loot the party members, right? It's always
I
the
mean, I
question when you're
prefer to
playing.
think of it as continuing the mission, but sure, call it looting.
Oh,
It's always one of those things when your wealth by level in a role playing game gets tipped off because someone died, and then they make a new character and they get their wealth by level, and you get all their stuff. You just sell it.
you know that
As you do.
That's the appropriate way to respond to character death is to just get the free money and move on, right?
Okay. So if you ever served with him and you're missing stuff, he's sorry. Or not. He might not be sorry.
I didn't steal from
you
people I
didn't.
worked
You acquired it.
with.
Tactical reacquisition. So do you ever draw on people that you served with in the military?
Yeah, not necessarily people so much as experiences. I try not to use wholesale stealing of personalities from people, but I do like to take moments. I remember one time I was a non-raid on the boat, and I was mess cooking that morning, and I was serving the breakfast mess, and one of the officers came in, and I was like, "Well, would you like bacon, ma'am?" And she's like, "I'm Jewish." I was like, "Okay, do you want bacon?" Because half the crew was like half the Jewish people on the crew wanted bacon.
As
And so
they should. It's good. Bacon is proof that God
I
loves us.
will admit, I know a lot of Jewish people who they don't eat pork except for bacon.
and I was just like, I don't care what your religion is. I just asked if you wanted bacon. Like that's so stuff like that gets put in my books of these just weird moments where people do weird things. I think those are a free game.
Fair enough.
People, I try not to do people wholesale.
Unless you have permission, of course, for legal reasons. If you're
Right?
listening, lawyers.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about how your time in the service affects the stories you tell, but how has it changed the kind of stories you read since you've had that experience and gotten out?
Oh gosh. So I've for a fairly long time was reading a large amount of military fiction, military science fiction. Um, there's a great book, and I didn't realize how much I loved this book until I kind of researched the author a little more and realized that he was also a former coastie. But Elliot Kay has a book called Poor Man's Fight, which is amazing. And I was like, man, this is so much like my experiences in boot camp, and so much like. And then I found out he was a coastie. I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense. So I read a lot more military-based fiction, Honor Harrington or things like that, where it's talking about war, talking about large-scale fighting.
Well, and Harrington has a couple scenes that are particularly in On Basilisk Station that are very Coast Guard-esque.
Oh yeah, no, and I think that's just Navy in general. But Basilisk Station is an interesting one because it is such a small conflict. Like it's just one ship in the middle of nowhere, which is very much what the Coast Guard almost always is.
Oh yeah.
So that's before it got too deep in roll pods and staff meetings.
No, On Basilisk Station is the first book.
I know, that's how I said before it got too deep on the rolling pods and staff meetings.
Well, yeah, the missile pods and the.
Don't just look at David and go waves of missile. Can't sum it up. Waves of missiles.
Yeah, I kind of stopped reading those after they got into like the super soldier Geno engineering. After the Haven fight, really, after it stopped being about Haven.
I stopped more because I had to switch just because life. I was switched mostly to audio, and I just didn't like the narrators they picked. And the audiobooks had the feel of like they were recorded on VHS maybe, and then copied a copy of a copy, and then they loaded them onto Audible.
Did they just not? Did they? I heard an interesting station from David Weber about Manticoran. Manticoran, sorry, Manticoran. So Manticoran, in the first book, he was doing a pronunciation guide for the narrator, and he wrote Manticoran for Manticoran.
Not even David says it like that.
Yeah,
No, that's what he's saying. That was the mistake that the narrator did.
Yeah, so no, David sent it as a pronunciation guide to the narrator and said it is pronounced Manticorin.
Well, that's why he has the Bu9 people. They just do that for him now.
And so there's a disclaimer on the first Audible book that says, "Hey, I said this wrong, and it's all my fault, and I'm sorry."
Yeah, you get that with some of the older classic books. They don't always update the audio, and then the high tech like audio. I don't know. I'm not an audio engineer, but the difference between that and then what we have now,
yeah, for sure,
is so different. And so sometimes the translation is just kind of crap, like the tech side. But anyway, all right. This is your fun fandom questions.
Yes, fandom questions.
Okay.
So, have you had any cool fan art or a cosplay of one of your characters yet?
No, I would love that. I'm not a there's the word. I'm not a mind blind person, but I very much don't describe things very much because I don't picture things when I'm reading.
Okay.
So I think that the reason I don't get a lot of art is because I don't describe a lot of things, and I've been trying to fix that. But
so do you picture them when you go to sleep? Because I've read books where it's like I can't seem to picture it, and then I go to sleep and it's all there.
I'm a lucid dreamer, so I always like I'll picture like I'll figure out plot points in my sleep because I can just go through situations and figure out what I'm trying to do in the next point, but I don't really review in my sleep. No. But I would love art. Anyone is listening to this, I would love art. That'd be freaking awesome.
So he wants art, and a cosplay would be cool. But have you had anyone ask for your autograph in public away from a book signing or a convention?
No, the closest I got was I was wearing my press's hat. I published through Mountaindale Press, and some guy asked me if I had read Divine Dungeon, and I was like, yeah, I know Dakota pretty well. And I was like, have you read any of the other books in there from them? And they're like, no. I was like, oh, you should. And then I was like, I wrote one of them. He's like, oh, okay, I'll think about it. I was like, okay, good. But other than that, it's just like I have
burn.
I have like a friend whose dad had me sign a book when I went over to their house, so that was probably the closest I've gotten.
Oh, that's cute.
So
have you spotted someone reading one of your books in the wild?
I think I've sold like 6 physical copies of books, so I don't know if I would even know if
you've sold more ebooks, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Okay, good.
No. Yeah,
I was trying to worry for you.
Yeah, physical books make up like
6 books. Sounds really concerning.
No, it's more than 6, but it's like it's physical copies are less than 1% of my total sales.
Okay.
So it's hard to say if I have or not because almost everything's ebook these days.
So, what is the weirdest or funniest fan interaction you've had? This could even be like what you were saying you had happen at Dragon Con.
So I was at Dragon Con, and Mountaindale Press had a booth there. So I was manning the booth, and I think I actually went to go grab some food because none of us had eaten in like 18 hours, and that was a bad thing.
As one does at Dragon Con.
Right. So I went to go get food, and these guys followed me through the line to grab the food. And then as I went to pay, they actually grabbed my bill for me. And they're like, "You're Xander, right?" And I was like, "Yes. How do you know that?" And then they're like, "Oh, I've read your book." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So they followed me from the Mountaindale Press's booth because they were too afraid to talk to me at the booth, and then paid for my food, which was pretty great. So
that is very, very sweet.
So I'm waiting for him to get the people who think it's real. Because, after Larry, I really want to get more of those stories.
Oh, gosh. Are there, like, for Monster Hunters, Inc.?
No, what was it? It was the guy that was with
Lizard
him.
People. It was
John Brown.
John Brown.
Oh man.
He had a fan have that happen.
Who believes that
There's
the
a
lizard
couple
people
of
are real?
authors who've had that happen to them. Ringo's had that happen to him, or City's Lackey.
None of those are all like they don't write contemporary fiction.
I had a fan at Dragon Con who tried to explain to me the genetics of Pern dragons and how they work and don't work. And I'm like, you
Um,
okay.
Okay, cool. I'm sure
So-
someone has done that work for Mercedes or Anne. Sorry.
So the trick is, I guess, you got to write conspiracy theory stuff, so that way you'll get the
maybe
people to come out.
It
Maybe
was
my next book.
Pern. There's no conspiracy.
Maybe my next book will be a conspiracy. They'll get that. I'm writing a
Just make Alex
modern-day-
Jones your antagonist or protagonist, whatever. I don't judge.
No, it's a athletic lit RPG thriller.
Okay, what does athletic mean in this?
So it's
in
about a
terms of this?
basketball player.
Okay.
So
I'm like, are you making them work out?
he does work. He does do a lot of working out. That's actually a very common trope in lit RPG in general, where you have these training montages.
The boot
Yeah.
camp sequence. Okay.
Yeah, because you grind, because it's in video games. It's like grinding is a thing in video
Gamers
games.
start
Grinding
naturally so fit.
Yeah, so grinding is a thing in lit RPGs.
All right. So this is the part where you tell us about all the amazing books you've written.
All right. How long do you want these? Like, do you want
As long as you've got, lay it on us.
All right. So Red Mage is a series about a guy who lives in DC and works in a government bunker. He's in the Coast Guard for some strange reason, and he wakes up one day. Well, he's at watch, and all the power goes out, and he's stuck in the middle of a bunker, and monsters are spawning, and he got magical powers. And his efforts to rebuild civilization after monsters kill everybody.
But him, so not everybody, just everybody.
Well, 90%, 95% of everybody. And then Talrock or Farming Livia, I guess I should say. Talrock is the name of the book. Farming Livia is the name of the series. Is about a guy who decides to join a VR MMO and be a agriculturalist on a frontier westward expansion like frontier world in a game to escape from his real life problems.
So when you say in a game, are they like playing the game and they get sucked in? They know, like, how does that work for what you write?
So there's a lot of them. A lot of them like do the Sword Art Online thing where they're stuck in the game. It's very low stakes, very low risk. My book is anyway. So he just plays the game, and that's the story is him playing the game and his real life outside of it.
Okay. So while those all sound fascinating, today we're going to talk about your Red Mage series and more specifically book 1, Advent. So where did you get the premise for this universe? How did you come up with the idea for the series? Was it psychedelics, Ouija board, overindulging in the drugs you captured when you were in the Coast Guard? We don't judge. Statute of limitations is applied.
I mean, Burning Day was always a good day in the Coast Guard. Everyone just stands around the fence and watches the marijuana burn. It's it's a good day. No. So Red Mage was started off as a idea of I like I said earlier, I just read System Apocalypse System Apocalypse by Tao Wong, which is a similar premise in that the world becomes infested with mana and monsters start appearing. And so I kind of took a fork of my life and said, okay, what would happen if monsters start appearing, 3 years ago when I was in DC and stuck in this bunker, and got magical powers and could like cast fireballs out of my hand. So kind of developed from there. I made up the magic system, which is kind of roughly based on Final Fantasy VII and Path of Exile, where you get magical gems that give you skills that you then use to kill stuff. And about 2 days later, I had the first 3 or 4 chapters and went on from there.
All right. So before we let Cisca dive into the questions about the story itself, she likes these questions. We've got to talk about that cover, which is on the screen for if you can't see it. So where did the idea, like, what's the story of this art? Because it's very evocative. I do enjoy the way it was laid out. So how did this art come to be?
So if you've ever seen Nathan Fillion's recreation of, like, he did a 15-minute short movie of what's the game called? Nathan Drake. Uncharted. So Nathan Fillion did a short movie about Uncharted, and there's a scene in the movie, in that short that he does, where it zooms in to Nathan, like over Nathan's shoulder, like you're playing the game of Uncharted, and he like starts shooting the guys. And I just love that concept of over the shoulder, like video game-esque. And I wanted to use that as a way of portraying that this is a lit RPG. And you're seeing it like you're the player viewing their character. And then this is just a scene in the book.
Okay. Cisca gets to have her happy time with these questions. And hopefully she won't stab herself with that knife she's got.
It's a knitting needle this time. So, what would be your 30-second elevator pitch for the book?
30-second elevator pitch would be, what would you do if monsters start spawning in your backyard and you got magical powers to fight them? How would that change your world, and what would you do what would your new rules be?
So,
so a little critique of that. If you're going to do this again in advance, because you get the questions in advance, you have to practice that in the movie trailer voice.
Oh,
and say, in a world. And you got to do I can't do the world, but
in a world where monsters spawn in your backyard, you wake up and magic powers are at your fingertips. What will you do?
I approve. That's better than I could have done, and you might have a secondary career path opening up to you.
Yeah.
Luke Daniels, eat your heart out. He's got you.
I'm definitely no, not as good as Luke for sure.
He does some good stuff, though. I like Luke.
He does. So what makes your series special and unique out of all of the RPG stuff out there?
I obviously I think that I'm special and unique in every way, and everything about it is unique and special.
You're a special flower.
I think the two things that kind of set it up as being really unique is the magic system, which is different from any other magic system I've ever seen in a book. In that you have these magical constellations and you get these crystals and they link together, and so you get so the main character has a fireball spell. He puts it in a constellation and he gets a cone of cold spell as well, and they link together to make a cone of frostfire and then a frostfire fireball. Or a frost fireball.
That's neat.
So I think that the magic system is by far and away more unique than anything else that I've seen. So, unique in literature, anyway.
So I've talked to a couple lit RPG authors, and there seems to be an approach of going very like, where are you on the stats? Are you heavy or light or in the middle? Especially since you have such a unique magic system.
So I am terrible with numbers. I think we mentioned this earlier today when we did I was supposed to show up and I was like, oh, I'm converting it between Eastern and Pacific time, and I showed up an hour early and they're like, we're not ready yet. I'm terrible at mental math, so I wanted to get away from having to do math as much as possible. So there are no numbers in Red Mage. It's on that regard, it's a very creamy system, as some people say. I hate that term.
It makes me think of light food.
Well, it's supposed to be a creamy versus crunchy, like peanut butter comparison.
Right. Peanut butter. We'll go with that.
Sure.
JR, you just made it. Just put weird thoughts in my head. So So yeah, it's very light on numbers. The system is involved, but it's all involved in the concept of non-numeric involvement. So it's
Okay.
so you have a very large number of possibilities, and it's using limited resources in unique and unusual ways.
So, what tropes do you think Red Mage hits the best?
So he is a bit of a glass cannon or a lancer, if you know those archetypes, the main character. A little bit of a loose gun, I think, is the TV trope's name for it, is a person who kind of operates outside of authority. Which is also funny because he's in the military, so there's another military one. But he has very few commanding officers are still alive, so he's sort of the highest in command, but not really.
You may just think he is.
So does he say, "Look at me, I am the captain now"?
No, there is a person who does that though. So he does. Midway through the book, he meets up with other survivors, and one of them is a Navy captain, and he's just a complete dick to Drew because Drew is a E5, and he's just like, "What are you doing? I'm in charge." And he's like, but you're in a cell, and I was the one that came and rescued you, so maybe I'll handle the operational aspect of things. And he's like, "No, I'm in charge." And you're like, "But no."
I think we have all known somebody who is like that. I think my favorite quote about the chain of command is still, "The chain of command is the chain I beat you with till you realize I'm in command."
Yeah.
I'll be in my bunk.
That was Firefly.
Yes, I know.
And Jane is definitely not in the chain of command.
But he should be.
Do you want to run this ship? Yes. Well, you can't.
All right, back to Red Mage, because we're here to pimp your book.
Okay, so we've covered the tropes. So which Jared loves making me ask this question: which subgenre or genres do you think your story best fits into?
So obviously, lit RPG is considered a subgenre to some people. So lit RPG is the genre. It fits. It's clearly in the lit RPG apocalypse or the RPG apocalypse subgenre of lit RPG, which is the system gets introduced to Earth type stories. Yeah, those are the genres that it would go. So post-apocalyptic would be like a side genre, urban fantasy without the love triangle aspect of urban fantasy. So yeah, those would be the kind of the major ones.
Okay.
So what makes your main character just stand out among all of them? Is it the real world experience you're bringing into him?
I hope so. Gosh, so
I don't think there are many vets in the lit RPG field.
There's surprisingly large amounts of us, actually. I would say probably 30 to 40% of the writers in the lit RPG genre.
Yeah, no, I take that back. I'm remembering the panel for Dragon Con, and I'm like, wait, no, he was. Oh, never mind. I'm an idiot.
So there's a lot of us who are vets. I think a lot
but most of them were short.
Like in height or short, like career wise?
No, short height wise.
Yeah, but you're an Amazon, so that doesn't count.
But I'm small.
Truth be told, I'm not actually 6 foot, so
we don't.
It's all right. Nobody will know.
Yeah, I guess they are short. I'm short myself, so I don't.
So you just got to write a few bestsellers and sit on your wall, and you'll be as tall as you need to be.
Yeah, like I said, money solves all of your attractiveness problems, right?
Chair screwed. Sorry.
Ooh, yeah. Ouch! You wound me. All right, back to his book. We're going to talk about his main character.
Okay, so tell us about your main character.
So Drew is kind of an everyman. I like to think that he's a rational person, kind of in a very weird, irrational world. I like to think that he's very relatable. He doesn't do everything right. He doesn't do everything, the best way, but he is efficient and effective at getting things done. In the story, he's kind of a unique class called a red mage, which is a very offensive magic caster. So he's got a lot of offensive spells. He can dish out a lot of damage in a very short amount of time, but not very good at anything melee related. So he kind of has to rely on other people to stand in front of him while he
So don't
lobs
touch it.
fireballs. So don't touch him. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think it's nice. He does have his strengths, but he's also got very obvious weaknesses, which is a great compromise, I think, in as far as the overpowered character trope goes.
Okay. Next question is you too.
And I know it is. So what secondary characters really stand out that you want to tell us about today? I mean, there's got to be somebody other than just Drew and the Navy lieutenant from Annoyingness.
Captain, yeah. So, gosh, there's so many. So in book 2, this is probably one of my favorite military jokes. Is he runs across a Marine unit in book 2, and one of the characters in there had got a Zathrite. Zathrites are the name of the crystals, which allows him to make crayons into weapons. And so all of the Marines are carrying around a bunch of crayons that they use as throwing knives.
That is awesome.
And then as he gets more skilled, they actually become edible for buffs. So they all like all the Marines start eating these crayons to like go into war.
Did you put that in specifically for James Hunter?
No, I put it in for every Marine I've ever met. But
so somewhere in the Pentagon, someone's frantically scribbling notes with ideas for the next R&D project.
Yeah, edible crayon department buffs. And so those guys are great. There's a guy named Bill who is a chief in the Navy, and he's a healer. And Drew is on it kind of in midway through book 1. He's on a quest to find someone to go help the rest of the people in his party because they're all unconscious or dying. And he finds Bill, and he brings him back, and he's got his ability is called Daddy's Embrace that he uses to heal people.
Creepy. Does he have a white van and offer them candy first?
No, the vans are gone.
No, so it's and you find out that he lost his children, and he was like a very dedicated father. And so Bill's got this kind of everyone has lost something in the apocalypse, right? But Bill is great because he's got all these abilities. Like his other ability is like a blanket fort that he can build that makes it like a safe spot in the middle of the apocalypse.
He built safe spaces.
Exactly. So there's a lot of great characters. I think the team is a very interesting dynamic. Because Drew can't do everything on his own, he was very reliant on his team. There's another character who has a chain chomp on his ankle that he uses to fight, like from Mario Brothers.
Okay,
that's unique.
So I think there's lots of unique and interesting towers or talents and powers and secondary characters that are based around those.
All right. So what about bad guys? Is it just the monsters, or are there larger bad guys they have to fight?
For the most part,
it's no spoilers.
For the most part, it's monsters. Obviously, as anyone in positions of power previous to this is DC. It does take place in DC, so there's lots of people who were very important prior to the apocalypse happening who think that they should be in power again, even though they have no real
funny how that works.
Authority or reason to be still in power. So there's a couple of human elements where people think that they might makes right, or their previous positions are still relevant.
Fair enough. Now, this is the normally Cisca's question because she loves asking it, but we all know that authors do horrible things to their characters, evil, dirty, rotten things, and they make them suffer so. So, if you met your characters in a back alley on some dark, shady night, and they found out you were Xander Boyce, author of their peril and turmoil, what would they do to you?
They would very politely ask me why, I think. And then maybe have some nickels ready and some socks.
All right, blanket party. I can approve of that. All right, so this is the question that we get to ask you how the sausage was made. So, were there any cool scenes or ideas that got cut from the book? Because you published this with a small press, so obviously your publisher gets a little bit of a say sometimes in the final product. So, were there any cool scenes that got cut that you want to share with us a little bit that didn't make it off the chopping floor?
I don't think so. Mountain Dell is great in that they're very open to. There's a couple things that I had to kind of rework, but they're all all the scenes that I planned and wanted in the book have made it into the series. I don't have a huge editing process like some people do. Like they'll go back and rewrite the book 6 or 7 times.
I don't understand that at all either.
That's not me. So I think everything made it in. There were a couple scenes that I wanted to put in, like while I was planning it, but couldn't figure out a way to do in the system, like in the world. But they didn't actually get written.
So you want to tell us about a few of those real quick, if you got any that you could, or what the coolest one that you had to cut from the outline?
So there's a scene where Drew is fighting. He's going through a underground dungeon, and they're fighting a monster. And originally, I was going to have him like attack these icicles that are hanging from the ceiling and have them drop, but I couldn't figure out a way to get it to work. So that's probably the closest. So it ended up actually being a really tragic response to that because his plan didn't work. But yeah, that was the scene I wanted to have happen. I wanted to have like the icicle destroying the monster, and it just didn't work.
All right. So finally, let's talk a little bit about the universe. You've told us some about the apocalypse comes, the monsters arrive. Sometimes we are our own monsters. And many worlds, the story is that the world that the story happens in is as much a protagonist. So other than what you've already told us, is there anything else about the world that would be of interest to someone saying, hey, this maybe sounds like it's my jam?
So as Drew gets further into like understanding why this apocalypse happened, he discovers that he has kind of been inducted into this Order of the Dragons, which is a military order about an intergalactic human civilization that has kind of created Earth as a petri dish for soldiers. And he kind of meets some of these mythical beings that all of like he meets some ancient Roman gods that are real people out in the multiverse that are generals in this army. And kind of so I like the so I guess kind of the idea is that there's all of the myths and all of the religions that we have on Earth have a basis in that multiverse's reality, where you have Loki and Ares and Hades and Isis out in the world.
All right, next.
So I know. So this is a series. I know so because the internet told me so. There's currently 2 books. So how many books do you think there's going to be? Will there be more of these characters? Where do you see it going? What's next?
So the first arc is going to be 5. I've planned 5 books. Sorry, 5 books. Wow. There might be more to Drew's story after those 5 books, but I kind of want to get those 5 books started first and then finished, and move on from there.
Awesome. And then, so obviously you have your own rules and magic, but what sort of magic would you pull from this to have in real life?
Oh gosh. He has a spell called Invigorate, which is basically the best form of coffee you could ever ask for. It makes it so you never have to sleep, and you always feel fresh and healthy.
I need that. I need that in my life. Where is
I
that?
would love to have that. It's kind of a ridiculously overpowered ability, to be honest.
So how would you abuse that in real life if you had it?
I would never sleep. I mean, I guess I don't sleep very much anyway, but yeah, just I would always be in perfect health and like perfect awareness. So
That would make conventions much more fun.
Right? You would never have to like be like, it's 2 a.m. I need to go get like the 2 hours of sleep that I'm going to get tonight so that I can be awake at 5 a.m. to, man the booth or whatever, get breakfast before the parade starts.
Okay, so when you mentioned that you have some fantastic creatures and some aliens, how did you go about making those? Did you create them out of whole cloth? Did you look at mythology books? Did you just stay up way too late at night and not get any sleep for like 4 days at DragonCon?
All of the above. So I like to draw from pretty much everywhere. There's monsters that are like giant fire-breathing crocodiles, or printers, or like, because they take elements of the environment that they're in and they change them, add magic, and they become bigger. So there's like massive spiders and massive rats.
No spiders. No giant spiders.
Cockroaches are okay, but no spiders, huh?
I don't like those either.
Lady has to have standards.
So you do that, and then you also do just there's also a card game that I have that's like it was made for creatives to do, and you pull like different cards out, and it gives you like a element and like a form and like a location, so you can kind of use that to make monsters. A lot of them are from mythology, like trolls or Naga, or things like that. Orcs.
Nice. The only good orc is a dead orc, just so you know.
I don't know. I've played a couple of half good. Well, I guess they're half orcs.
See,
Thrall was a good orc.
Was he? Was he though?
I mean, yeah.
Better standards of good.
So send your hate mail to Jay Boyce at.
Yeah, do that. Do that. Obviously.
As you do. So clearly this is winding down. You told us all about Advent and the Red Mage series, and we will link all of his stuff in the show notes. So if you want to check it out, if this sounds interesting, you can go click that buy all button. And if they don't have it yet, they really should. And then when Amazon creates it, they'll just pay us a little bit of a royalty for giving them the idea, because I'm sure no one else has thought of that before. But was there anything about Red Mage or Advent Book 1 that you wanted to tell us that we didn't ask?
Anything I wanted to tell you that you didn't ask? No. It's a great book. You will enjoy it. There's the lit RPG genre in general is built for our time. I think it's a great mixture of playing the games that we don't want, or that we don't have available to us currently, and the fantasies that we've always wanted. And life is great, and Advent is an enjoyable read that you should read.
All right. Is it out in all the formats? Ebook, audiobook, paperback?
Paperback, everything. Print on demand from Amazon. So you can do it in anything but hardcover. So
Okay. That'll be coming if you just pay him enough money. I'm sure he can make that happen for you. And I'm sure for the right fee, he'll even drive to you and read it to you in person.
No, that's Jason. That's Jason Asnach. Not
that's how you get miseried. I will not do that.
He's gonna love how you mispronounce his name, by the way. All right, so yeah, it's Ansbach.
Ansbach. It doesn't look like it's spelt.
I mean,
I'm special ed. Sometimes it's special.
They do weird things out in, where he's at in Paola, so whatever. But clearly, this interview is winding down. So, can you tell us, Xander, how our dear listeners and viewers can find you on the wild, wild interwebs?
Yeah, so you can get me on Facebook with author Xander Boyce. You can do Patreon at DM Xanadu, XANDAD. I can't spell because spelling is hard out loud. XANDAU. Yeah, sure, that sounds right. And then that's pretty much it. I don't do any of the other social medias because I'm old and think it's weird.
It is weird. All right. You can find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades. Anchor.fm/blasters tech and tech blades. You can find us on the Twitters at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show, science fiction _fantasy_show. See, there's a trend here, people. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We even sometimes remember to check it. We have the Blasters and Blades Facebook group at facebook.com/Blasters and Blades Podcast. And if you can support the show and help keep the lights on and that sacred bean water flowing, it's buymeacoffee.com/ I can speak, author J.R. Handley, and make sure you put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and that is where it shall go. All right, Cisca, save me from myself.
Never. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. Are the absent comic artist Nick Garber, the crazy J.R. Handley. I'm Cisca. This was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and picking on JR.
As you do.